So this isn't about making sure the conversation only goes in one direction. It's about making sure that we're dealing accurately with the facts to the best of our ability. We can't guarantee we're always right. And you can straight up say that nothing tonight is legal advice. You are always responsible for everything that you do, and you're responsible for your own research. You're responsible for any lumps or bumps you get along the way. I'm not taking any of them for anybody, and neither is Peter. So we'll do things in the right spirit, but if I think Peter's gilding the lily or something like that, as we say, I won't be letting him get away with anything like that. But my experience of Peter, I'd like to have more awareness of Peter, but my experience so far is that he's pretty straight up and down. And that's why we're fortunate to have him along here tonight. And we're going to increase the quantity of knowledge that we have independently and jointly and become more of a force to be reckoned with. So these, it's hard to find the right objectives at times, so that the people in control can't basically wipe us out, which is what they're looking to do. So I'll ask Peter to raise his hand if he can, or I'll unmute him. There he is. If you could unmute yourself, please, Peter. All good. There you are. Good to see you, mate. Thank you so much for coming along tonight. I arranged this a long time ago. What was it, Pete? Lunchtime? Peter was doing a live, and I happened to catch it during lunch, and I thought, oh, I know some of the people he's talking about.
We save him for last, or what?
Well, what I was going to suggest to you, Peter, is you run how you want to run, mate.
Well, appreciate that very much, Stephen, and hi to many of the people here that I've been on Zooms before with many of you, or I may have been incognito, keeping my mouth shut on a few occasions. But I have followed this group with great interest and pretty incredible stuff that I've heard along the way. So I learn probably more than you guys, because I was brainwashed as a economics and law student way back in 1973 when I did a Bachelor of Economics and Politics and then a law degree at Monash University, and did my articles, and then finally was admitted to practice as a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Victoria before 5 Supreme Court justices on the 2nd of April 1979. So at that stage, I'm wondering whether we did the right oath back then. Did we get the oath right back then, Stephen?
I wasn't there to witness your oath, Peter.
I want to see if it's actually changed. I mean, you'll prompt me to make a phone call to the Supreme Court tomorrow and just see if they've changed the whole thing. But I got brainwashed. I didn't get taught natural law and common law and all the other maritime law and all this stuff. You know, it's basically I have to start from scratch like everybody else to get up to speed with what the real law is. And on 4 occasions, I've actually applied for a practicing certificate. One when I was working for Cook and Cousin back in the old days, where I did 3 years as a normal, lawyer doing all the different crash and bash and family law and all this stuff, which I hated. And then I got recruited, which is a brilliant move in hindsight, to work for the government, federal government, which we now want to bring down big time. And I'll be talking about
we government agencies. We don't want to bring down the federal government. We would like one.
The alternative government, exactly. So when they didn't know what to do with corporations back then, I don't know, they didn't have ABNs back then. This is 1981. They introduced what was then called the National Companies and Securities Commission, and I started off as a legal officer the week before. And I can guarantee when the Act started on the 1st of July, 1981, on day one, it became corrupt in my eyes before the chairman, Lee Maisel. And I'll tell you why. So I was disillusioned on day one as a legal officer working for the federal government's National Companies and Securities Commission. You now more familiarly would know it as ASIC. Mm-hmm. And they're just as corrupt now as they've ever been, probably more so. And basically they ignored a cover up back then of the sampling of the diamonds at the Argyle diamond find, would you believe? And we had the whistleblowers like we do today And we've got the great whistleblower saying CRA, which is now Rio Tinto, was concocting these mining samples and pretending that there weren't as many diamonds there, which screwed the small 5% joint venture holder, Northern Mining. And right in the very first week, Alan Bond poked his nose in and started to buy control of Northern Mining. So instead of the what's now ASIC, then the NCSC taking on CRA and Rio Tinto for forging the samples to prove there wasn't many diamonds there, so they could screw the joint venture partner that only owned 5%. We went after Alan Bond, of course. So that's when I learnt there's a two-tier of regulation. And that's what I've seen ever since I started in this health game back in 2011. So
Peter, just in that thing with the diamonds, was part of the result of that keeping the diamond price higher?
Well, it was a time the Afghanistan war was on, and I have talked to people that have served in the Afghanistan war, and they told me they'll never leave Afghanistan because it's so centrally positioned. But back then they were scared about the shortage of rare earth minerals, and they were also worried about the impact in South Africa was raging with the apartheid, and they didn't want to unstable a diamond market. So they didn't want people, they were pretending that it was a crappy little deposit.
Yes.
And we've all found out since it's the biggest deposit of all time, and has now got all the premium diamonds as well. So they completely cooked the books so they could screw the minority shareholders in the joint venture at Argyle, and in the process not destabilised De Beers, which had a big shareholding in it, being the main player in South Africa. So I got silenced. In fact, I was getting married that year, and the CEO came up to me at one point, so I'm taking off the case because I was rocking the boat with the main guy at The Age that was writing up all this whistleblower stuff. And I'm literally told by Ray Shower, you keep your mouth shut, you got a big future, son. I paid out ever since on that. And when he became chairman of the stock exchange in the 90s, I was setting up a fund management company then to take advantage and to fuel the medium and small size companies. And he tried to screw me 4 times at the stock exchange and stopped me listing 4 public companies, but we nailed him every time after a lot of hard work. So I can't tell you just how corrupt it all is and disillusioning. And then the second year I was at the NCSC, and this is relevant to where we're at right now because I'm taking the same prick on. I swear a bit, Karen Brewer. Do you swear a bit? Do you say that FARC word a bit? F-triple-A, triple-R, triple-K.
Well, so anyway, you saw Karen come in there, did you, Peter?
Oh, I just spotted her smiling face, but I better be careful talking about pedophiles and, well, my mates at Brighton Grammar. But anyway.
Just while we're there, Peter, just to make clear for anybody that's in the room, does anybody have a problem, if anyone has a problem with this sort of going to air, so that there's a wider viewing audience than just here? We're not streaming live. I didn't want to experiment with that straight up, but we would look at making a video and putting it out to a wider audience. So if you've got a problem with that, it'd be a good idea to maybe change your name or turn your camera off. So you okay with us doing all that, Peter?
Mate, I've talked about this before, so I'm like Karen. We're all in. There's no turning back now. So, I've called out these corrupt people plenty of times, and they know who I am, and they've been battling me since I was 27. So, anyone who wants to say that I'm not an Australian lawyer and I'm a scam artist, well, you go back to my career in 1981, and I'll name another name because this goes public. I'm sick to effing death, fucking death, of that head of the AVN. Apparently she bagged me in a meeting last week and said I was crazy still. I mean, she's the one that spread the scam artist stuff and the fact I'm not an Australian lawyer.
What's the AVN?
That's the Australian Vaccination Risk Network, been run by Meryl Dorey for 25 years. I don't know why she wants to slam me all the time and call me a scam artist and not an Australian lawyer. I mean, it's just a fact. You can't. The whole point of being an Australian lawyer is, were you admitted to practice as a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Victoria? Yes, I was. End of story. 41 years an Australian lawyer. Okay, flip to the last case I was involved in, which is absolutely mega critical for all of us in the freedom of consent movement, when his insurance lawyers, and I'll come back to fill in the gaps, in 2016, Dr. John Pearce, who was working in 2 places, one at the naturopath clinic in Mitcham with my naturopath, brilliant naturopath, Narita James, and then he was also working at NIMS, which is the one and only National Integrated Medical Mob, and then he did 300 exemptions for vaccine safety and got done over by AHPRA, which is the Australian Health Regulation Practitioner Agency. The relevance of all that is that his insurance lawyers completely screwed him, ball partners, and they all do, these insurers that act for the doctors, gave him zero chance of getting anywhere. And I took over his case in VCAT in 29th of July in 2019. Now, how the hell could I act for the #1 vaccine safety doctor without an Australian legal practicing certificate, which I'd had the year before, because I didn't want one that year and I didn't need one. Why? Because the Act which governs the discipline of these health practitioners, 700,000 of them in AHPRA, but in Victoria it comes under the Victorian Civil and Administrative Appeal. You can act for these people if you are a professional advocate. Now, professional advocate is defined to include an Australian lawyer, okay? And that's why I was able to act. I didn't need to go and get a certificate from a corrupt body called the legal, whatever it is, legal profession, a legal services commissioner, which proved he was corrupt back in 2017 when I did get my practicing certificate for the 4th time in my career. So I had one practicing certificate when I was working for Rigby Cook back in 79 to 81. I had a corporate certificate. I had an employee certificate when I was working for the government, and then I got poached to go to Macintosh Hampson Hall Gazette, which is now Merrill Lynch, and I was director of corporate finance in 83 after doing, because of all my experience in takeovers and the corporations law when I was working for the government for 2 years at the start of this ASIC legislation.
Okay, so Peter, with a practicing certificate, does that have a time limit on it, or is it related to where you work, to a location where you're working, or?
Well, you can be an employee certificate, so you've got a principal of a law firm. You can have a corporate certificate if you're working for one of the corporations. It's got an ABN, or you can have a full practicing certificate if you're a principal of your own law firm, which I was in 2017 and back in 2013 when I did another case. But so there's 3 types there, and they're renewable every year, just like the doctors. So just like most of these schemes, accountants and lawyers, you got to renew your registration, and you got to do CPD, continuing professional development, which obviously none of the medical doctors do when it comes to vaccines. They wouldn't have a clue. So I don't want one at the moment because all that would happen, I'd be tied up in disciplinary proceedings for mouthing off on Facebook and talking on Zooms that get leaked to the regulators. So I don't need one at the moment, and I'm not going to go and apply for one.
Okay, so what we've done is we're dealing with some of the flack that you cop about people saying that you're not valid, and you've established that you're valid. But what were you doing today? Why did you have to take to the air today?
Well, basically firing myself up after 10 years of doing essentially pro bono advocacy work for the natural health movement, which started 10 years earlier on the 25th of October when my hyperbaric oxygen guy got done over by AHPRA. He didn't tell me. I mean, he'd been doing this for 2 years with his lawyer. Another lawyer paid about $500,000 and completely stuffed the case up. And he'd admitted that he was guilty of professional misconduct and was about to be disciplined. Anyway, they leaked the agreement that he'd signed under duress because he'd run out of money, and it got published in the Melbourne Age. So today I was back at the Melbourne Age. I've been staying in town with one of the frontline people that's got a few health issues, and I'm just trying to nurse him through. So I thought I'd go down the Age and I'd have a bit of a crack at trying to put together the 10 years of work I've done and where I think we need to drive the freedom of consent movement, particularly ahead of the weekend where there's going to be a workshop at Magpie House on the strategy and tactics that we can all do, bringing the collective wisdom together. So I'll detail the key points in a minute, but I just wanted to put together the fact that I've had 41 years as an Australian lawyer deemed under law. Yep. I've worked at the highest level of government and took on Murdoch in the last year when I was back in 83. As a massive case, 50 arch lever binders, as a High Court decision came out of that case. So they knew that the NCSC, which is now ASIC, they hated me taking on Murdoch. which I did with Dick Gross. Two of us put amazing work together, and we worked on that case for a year. And then I've worked for the top stockbroker firm for 2 years, doing the biggest deals there ever was, I mean, including the Elders takeover CUB. And then I became the biggest venture capitalist with Carl Wilson in the 90s, had 4 publicly listed companies, despite my old CEO boss at the NCS who trying to stitch us. And we had joint ventures with the trade union funds. I mean, I don't know what else I got to do. Then I had the best property on the Mornington Peninsula. Then I had Kylie Minogue's property at French Island for 8 years. I've reinvested everything I've got left after 2 divorces, including my inheritance. And I'm still here 10 years wanting to bust this, once and for all, because I think collectively we've got the goods on this mob, right? Yeah. And hopefully I'll be able to sum it up again like I did today and make it pretty simple, even though it's incredibly complex the way they've done the whole system. And I'm just sick of people calling me not an Australian lawyer and I'm a bloody scam artist. I mean, I tell you what, it's the worst scam of all time. If you can find the money, I'd love to know. And I've had about 10 families looking after me, and I'm not counting 10 families in the movement that I didn't have any cash to support myself anymore, right? And then they did 2 fake fundraisings on me last year.
Tonight, Peter, what I sensed when I was talking to you today, that you were a bit fed up with things, and you probably needed a bit of an opportunity to vent. Now, there's a lot of people that would be aware of you, but there's also a lot of people who aren't. So I'm really glad that you were able to go through your history and you've established to people you're a lawyer, that you're qualified legally. You're not some scam artist that's half pretending. You've got the street cred. But the more you spoke, the more nervous I was about talking with you. I don't really like talking with lawyers, so it's an interesting paradigm. You mustn't how you're received by lawyers generally.
They don't want to talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I said I'll give you all my documents that I think you could win your cases, I don't even want to meet. So this vaccine game's a very interesting game. I'm yet to find someone who'll sit down with me and work on the same team. There's been a lot of fun and games since I initially started 10 years ago in a massive VCAT case. There's never been a longer case. It's the biggest case ever in VCAT. It went for 55 days, including a 34-day final hearing. And it included, I wish you could see the whites of my eyes, but it's a bit dark here. We were up against Dr. Ian Freckleton QC, who's the absolute doyen. There's no QC higher than him. He's the go-to man that the government have every time they want to stitch up a pracky. And they tried to nail the #1 hyperbaric practitioner that I was being treated with, Mel Hooper. And we stood up to that bully, for 2 years after he virtually had Mel done and dusted. And he's such an evil man, that man, Dr. Ian Freckleton. And he used a pedophile doctor as the key witness in that case, Chiropractic Board of Australia v. Mel Hooper. And he used Dr. Ian Churchyard, who was under chaperone orders from APRA for mucking around with all these male patients, right? Now, we didn't know any of that, and Freckleton didn't tell anybody, but he had, on witnesses, including one in New Zealand. He had the sexual boundary cases of one of our witnesses in New Zealand, but he never told anyone that his prime witness was under chaperone orders from APRA for pedophilia.
As a chaperone order, would that basically mean that he has to have somebody with him at all times to make sure he doesn't cross boundaries?
No, you have to have a door open so someone can see you when they're fiddling with them. It's a joke. Yeah. And then when I busted all that, when Church, this was ended up in 2013, that case, after 2 years and 17 arch lever binders, 906 scientific review articles. I mean, I cross-examined the #1 Cochrane expert witness of them and pulped him. They didn't even use any of his stuff. This is why I'm pissed off that Meryl Dorey last week called me crazy. And I'm sick of her doing it. She's been saying it for 5 years, right? And she's running the anti-vax movement for 25 years. So stop calling me crazy, when no one's got a track record like I have the last 10 years.
Peter, let me help you in that area. Now, and I might offend somebody here, but it's life. This is different. My family had a motor dealership for like 40 years. Now, what I notice is vehicles, I'm definitely going to offend someone, vehicles that have the worst track record and the least performance have the most advertising. And that's why you see Jeeps being advertised all the time, because
Yep.
if they weren't, people wouldn't buy them based on their performance. So they do that. So what you've got is somebody that's trying to convince everybody that you're not what you are. That's why they have to keep saying that you're a shill, that you're a scam, you're whatever, because your performance proves that you're not. So this is the opposite case. So I would actually, from where it's coming from, I'd be looking at it as a feather in your cap.
Well, I take it as a compliment, but we're running out of time and the world's about to get vaccinated. So why is the head of the vaccination movement stopping me getting this stuff back in again that I've been trying for years to get into the right court and the right frame, right? So, you know.
Well, does she have a track record of actually doing anything positive for the vaccine, for what she's supposed to be advocating?
Well, they don't do any court actions, right? They raised $150,000 in 2016, the year that I tried to bring the Vax movie prior to the federal election in 2016. I had joint venture discussions with Tasha David, the then president, which they deny. But I mean, I've got a 4-hour recording if people want to hear that, and they say it was fake. So yeah, I've got a track record going back 2016 trying to do something with them, and they didn't want to introduce the Vax movie that prior to the federal election. Okay.
So wouldn't this woman have to be controlled opposition?
Well, I don't know. I maybe not. I don't know. I just don't know why she keeps chopping up and keeps saying it's crap. And then when I took over the case for Dr. Pierce in 2019, I mean, the AVN didn't want to help him either. And I want to talk to you about a family court case that I did in 2018, which involved trying to break the family law precedent with vaccine parents, where the family court have always sided with the father who wants to stitch up the ex-partner or the ex-mother, or not the ex-mother, but the ex-partner who's mother of the children. The family court always let the kids be vaccinated against the wishes of the mother, you know.
Yeah.
So we tried to bust that one, and the AVM wouldn't help that case either. But that case has set it all up. It's that case when I did have an Australian legal practitioner certificate. I paid a lot of money at offices going in Sydney and Victoria, because I was also running at the same time Chase's case, which paralyses the political system in New South Wales, and all of them are corrupt there. Chase Walker-Stephen, the disabled boy, the most disgusting case of all time. I had officers in both states running it on my own, and it's that family court case that set this whole thing up I want to talk to you about. And then the Dr. Pierce case finished it off, except I then got sabotaged at the end by Barry McInerney, who was supposed to be the great white hope of the common law movement, trying to undermine me when we're just about going to clutch victory from the jaws of massive opposition from our own team, you know.
Well, Barry's one of our favourite people.
Yeah, well.
Now, in this, what we might do at the moment, because I know we've got Karen here, and I know that she's got other commitments that she has to go to. So, if you don't mind, can we get into that area that would come under that umbrella that Karen holds as well? You mentioned something to me today about somebody else that you're representing. Is that an appropriate thing to speak about in relation to
pedophilia?
Yes.
Not that individual, no.
Okay.
Well, I mean, all I'll say is that I have been approached by 3 major players. One that's got a major knowledge of the, let's just say, the Beaumont children issue, and this is in addition to Raquel Vaughan, who I've had discussions on the phone with, that said her father had the Beaumont kids in her boot. The other one is in relation to a fairly prominent politician involvement with this person, and the third one relates to a very senior public officer that this whistleblower's got a lot of dirt on, let's just say, because of having a close family relationship, and I don't want to say any more than that.
Okay. Now, when we were talking earlier, and in the meantime, I've had an opportunity to make a couple of phone calls, because I was involved in a case just recently, which is still ongoing, and it involved a whistleblower who is a school teacher and brought information to the police where there's at least 15, up to 15 children that we sort of know of that have gone missing, that have just disappeared.
Yeah.
She named 60 people who were either enabling or committing pedophilia. She was referring to what they call dollar drop babies, where you've got girls 10,
Yeah.
11, 12 years of age having babies when those babies are purchased. Now, there's other elements within it. She went to the police. 2 days after she went to the police, there was a knock on her front door. She opened the door, she was knocked unconscious, and she was assaulted and raped. And at one point, when she regained consciousness, she heard one of the men saying that he was going out to his car to get his gun, and she escaped from the house. Now, she was examined by a doctor. At that point, made the discovery that she'd actually been raped by 4 men. Now, when she made the complaint that this had happened, the police decided to lay charges against her for knowingly making false statements and making false 000 call, and then she was looking at 24 years in prison. That's what they were putting up to her. Now, at this point, there's a lot of meat in there. One of the situations that her father, as it turned out, was one of the witnesses in the Wood Royal Commission into, I think it was an institutional pedophilia, that sort of thing. And he was interviewed by a barrister named Henley. And I'm happy to use his name because he's now a judge. So the first time that I appeared in court with her, Henley was the judge. So she's standing in front of a judge when he was a barrister, was questioning her father and suggesting that her father enjoyed the activities that he had to perform on Bob Hawke.
Mm.
So now I've been given permission to use the information and to say the names because we are now very, very concerned for her health and well-being. She was arrested just recently and we don't know where she is, and we don't know her well-being. So there was 2 more times that week we appeared in court. Now, there's a very interesting thing with this case, and I'd like to put a call out there because we've got a missing person, and this is a pretty interesting missing person. This missing person is named Detective Anthony Totaro. He's from the Lismore Police Office, the police station. He's the fellow that laid the charges against Deborah Irene Robinson. And unfortunately, Detective Anthony Totaro has gone missing and nobody knows where he is. And when we were in court, they couldn't find him and they stood up in court and said, we don't know where he is. Now, he's a detective. These guys are supposed to be detectives. He's one of their employees and they can stand up in a court case and the fellow that's laid the charges can't find. Like, this is just, it's just beyond, well, to me, it's beyond belief. It's so ridiculous. And they were laying folders of information on us, giving us half an hour to look at it, and considering that was reasonable time. So, at the time, on the final day, Deborah, she's an epileptic, and on the Tuesday that we were at court, she became quite ill. She had to go to the doctors. We couldn't get into the doctors that evening, but she went to a hospital the next day. The bloods and everything that was taken from when she was examined showed that if she hadn't had a stroke, she was on the verge of having a stroke. She was removed from that hospital by a doctor who hadn't been seeing her. They came down the hall and said, "This is all a sham. She's not having an episode. She's not having a seizure. This is all a sham seizure. Get her out of the hospital. I'll call the police." And then he said, "Actually, get her out of the hospital." And I am calling the police. So she had to leave. Next day, we went to court, and through there was when we realised that this detective, they couldn't find him. They were going to go ahead with the case anyway. She was doing very poorly health-wise, and I was able to get permission, if you like, through a sheriff who was actually very helpful, so that she could go out and get air. And when she was outside, she decided she couldn't come back. So that was the last that we saw. That was in November, and then she was arrested on Sunday. So situation they're actually claiming that she was raped by her husband. They're not interested in laying charges against him. They want him as a witness against her. But at the time of the rape, he was actually around 20 minutes away with the two children, and actually has a receipt from an ATM for a transaction that he was making at the very time that this all was supposed to happen. So we're in the case now, we've got to work out sort of what to do. I'm definitely not qualified to be standing in court helping somebody, but unfortunately, after spending $120,000 with solicitors, they didn't have any money left, and they needed some support. So what I've described to you sound a bit consistent to what happens in this area?
Nothing surprises me, I can tell you that. I mean, I know that little Chase was 60 days in the John Hunter Children's Hospital, and he had 15 drugs put into him from 18 different practitioners. And on one occasion, the mother found him with a red raw penis. And if I ever find the prick that did that, I tell you what, yeah, I don't know. I mightn't be very good at non-violent activism, but nothing surprises me anymore. And I should mention there was 60, I found out there were 60 doctors at APRA that were allowed to keep practicing that had these chaperone orders, right? So I wonder if any of those have given false evidence in other cases. And also there was there's a book actually written by Helen Tagornis, and I mean, she's not talking to me at the moment. She's pretty nervous about her life, but she got done over by the medical board in Australia probably around about 2004, 2005, when it was under state-based control. And she'd reported the head of the AMA, right, as being a pedophile, and a whole heap of others. And it's all in her book. She'd exposed the whole thing, you know. So it was, she was way ahead of her time, and naturally she got rubbed out. And she's still living in Melbourne, but yeah, she's got a lot of stories to tell. But their books, the book would be a good read now for Karen. I don't know if Karen Bruce had a read of that book, but look, none of us really know how big it is, other than it's pretty sick. But if you want me to take you through probably the three key federal government agencies that I think the gap is where to drive the wedge in to actually make these people accountable. I'm happy to show you some of the documents if that helps you.
Well, if you feel it will help, it's obviously we haven't sort of seen it, because you start to wonder. Well, I don't wonder at all, actually. I can't see how anybody can get any sort of result through this system that we have. We don't have a lawful government. The judges aren't judges. They're not performing in accordance with the Constitution. And from the information that I've come across recently, which you might not be, or you may or may not be aware of, unless they're being paid in pounds, shillings, and pence, they're not actually adjudicating over the people. They're just working for a corporation and administering decisions on behalf of the corporation. So when you come back to the Constitution, whether people want to accept it as being a thing or not, there's no basis for our legal system as being lawful or authentic in no way, shape, or form. And no disrespect to you, of course, Peter.
Well, if you want to share the screen, I'll see if I have a quick go, because I think I've got a document that even a corrupt judge couldn't rule against.
There you go.
And that's why I'm pissed off that we didn't get the chance to play that in the Supreme Court, because of one key person we'll talk about later.